Donald Trump is banking on America's good economy to secure his reelection, but the global impact of the coronavirus on stock markets, supply chains, and the U.S. economy may put a kink in Trump's armor. Financial expert Max Wolff will join us now to lead off our discussion. He's managing partner of Multivariate. Okay, let's begin with the bad week with the stock market. Got better today. What do you make of the effect of the coronavirus on the stock market?
So certainly it was a tough week last week, and today was quite a bounce. I do think that Jerome Powell, under heavy pressure from consulting physician Donald J. Trump, has gotten into the virology business, and I don't think that's one that his credentialing or various weapons to use are terribly well suited to. And I think, unfortunately, although it's repairable, this has been a tough episode for the Fed, and it further suggests no patience and an overly solicitous relationship both with equity markets and with a sitting president.
What's your assessment of how ready companies in the United States are to deal with a pandemic?
Sure. So look, on some level, nobody is ready for a pandemic, and we all hope that we don't get tested and it doesn't get revealed in the most lethal and disruptive way possible. That being said, it's clear that the federal government spent a bunch of time on this, but they got into the business late and they have not put much effort or resource against it. And so we still have major newspapers, the New York Times, Washington Post, et cetera, talking about, and two physicians who are begging for testing kits that they're not getting. And that's separate and apart from the fact that we know this is a recurable disease, so you can get it, get better, go out and get it again, and that we don't really have our arms around how fast and under what exact circumstances it can be communicated from one person to another. So it's a emerging threat and a meaningful one. And I think we've already seen the worst case scenario. If you look at things like the travel industry, hospitality industries, if you're in the hotel or airline business, this is already a 40% haircut in the market last week, although some bounce today, and a pretty scary event with an unknown end date.
And the political aspects of coronavirus, how do you assess that?
Well, that's probably even harder than the difficult economics, but I do think we've adopted both a political and economic world that assumes that we're somehow protected from the worst of things. So the Fed jumps in every time the market falls, no matter how overdue that reset of prices probably is. And I think the hope is that this will be cured either strangely by monetary policy or by someone else. The real test of a society, a government, an apparatus is always the response, not the disease or the disaster. Right? Think of the most prepared countries have an earthquake and they have 10 deaths and they're all tragedies, and the least prepared countries have 10,000 deaths, right? And so how you respond is the big story here. And so far, I think you'd have to give the government, sitting government here, something like a C- in terms of the readiness and speed of engagement, but that can be made up for by future excellence, which I think we might be betting some of our prosperity and some of our lives on.
Amid fallout from the coronavirus, Trump has doubled down on his criticism of the Federal Reserve. He's demanding lower interest rates. What's your reaction to that?
It would be tragic to see that. First of all, there hasn't been a growth slowdown yet, particularly in the U.S. There's one likely. We can't do everything with monetary policy, and the Federal Reserve catered to a whim that had no basis in macroeconomic fact flow in December, and his stock market claims or anyone's re-election are not the reason to make monetary policy. If the Fed continues to do these things, it will lose the perception of independence. It will therefore be unable to reassure the market during those episodes when the Federal Reserve should and needs to intervene. And it will undermine the credibility of King Dollar, the US dollar, which is a cornerstone of American prosperity and really has been since we took the global title from the United Kingdom in the period between World War I and World War II. So we are playing with real fire here, and this is a disturbing episode to witness, especially given that the macroeconomy in the U.S. so far is defined by ultra-low interest rates, and we haven't seen the macro disruption yet rise to the occasion outside of the equity market. And I'll remind everyone again that equity market price targeting is not the basis for rational monetary policy, and has redistributive effects in the U.S. economy, which have led to a lot of turmoil and some pretty substantial extreme opinion in the American electorate.
Are you pessimistic about all this, Max?
It's hard to be optimistic about Corona, but I do think it's solvable. I think these are, unfortunately, these crossroad moments in the evolution of an economy and a polity where you either step up and do the hard, brave, right thing that's caused some immediate pain, or you don't, and if you don't, it eventually catches up with you, and if not today, then probably not that far in the future. Got to remind people that the cornerstone of this bounce back we've seen is free money, ultra loose monetary policy, trillion-dollar annual deficits, and upward wealth redistribution. And if you look at primary results or various debates in the Congress, the country's pretty polarized, they're pretty angry, and I don't know if it's the right time to add a bunch of stress to the situation.
Hey, Max, thanks for joining us. Always a pleasure talking with you.
Always my pleasure. Thank you for having me.